Rolling.
All right. Hey, everyone.
Oh, wait, sorry, one more second.
Sure.
We're just getting a pause from the outside. Okay, we're ready.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Show me the meaning!
My name is Jared, and we've got a full house today. We've got some exciting guests. First of all, we have the regular dudes. We got Ryan and Austin.
What's up, film fans?
Hey.
And we have special guests from the Extra Credits YouTube channel. We have James Portnow and Matt Krol. How's it going, guys?
Hey, everybody. This is James Portnow.
And this is Matt. What's up, everybody?
So we're really happy to have them. If you don't know about Extra Credits is an awesome YouTube channel that does everything from history to video game appreciation. Why don't I let you guys talk about it? Because you're probably much better at pitching it than I am.
No, I mean, I think you got it. I have been a game designer for many years, started a YouTube channel with a buddy of mine talking about how we can get more from our games and understanding game design, expand to teaching some history, and now 1 million people watch it. So that's us.
Rock and roll. And I know, Matthew, you are a TV producer. You work for MTV and Viacom. You're a voiceover actor. He's also the co-host of Talkin' Movies with Matt and James and another movie podcast called The Only Podcast About Movies.
There is an asterisk in there, just so everyone is clear. We've done research for about 3 minutes, and we didn't find anybody there. We've heard there's more.
I like the fact that we actually prefaced it with another podcast about
Exactly.
called The Only Podcast About Movies.
Oh, that's hilarious. Awesome. So, guys, today we are talking about the 2018 movie Annihilation, written and directed by Alex Garland, starring Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaac. So, as always, we're going to go around and we're going to get first impressions. Usually we talk about what it's like revisiting a film, but since this film is brand new, I imagine we've probably all only seen it once. So, let's start with the new kids on the block. Let's start with James. James, what do you think about this movie? High level.
High-level version, I thought that it did some great world building, but I was somewhat disappointed because having read the book before going into the movie, I felt like the book asked a lot more questions, and there were things that the movie just touched on, which I loved the exploration of in the book.
Interesting. What about you, Matthew?
I overall dug it. I dug it more from a general story perspective. Although I hadn't read the book, I didn't even know it was a book till a dinner party I was at discussing the film. And then I realized that there was a trilogy of books that this thing was based off. I'm like, that makes a lot more sense. I dug it overall. However, it definitely suffers from a trope, which I'll get into a little more, called smart people doing stupid stuff. And there's one or two issues I have along the way, but I really enjoyed the fact that it cleared up the how things were going on overall and made us sort of more question the why, and I dug that.
All right, interesting. And Ryan?
Well, I liked it more than they did, I think, because I thought just cinematically, man, like the last really let me preface that. I'd say that the last 45 minutes or hour is what made me really, really, really love the movie. But then the build up to that point was pretty good. It was interesting. It was, there were some cool scenes and the world building was cool. But that last act, spoiler alert, the silent one is really awesome, I thought. And Jared, you're about to give your review, but Jared watched on a laptop, which I don't feel like. You're gonna have to take his review with a grain of salt.
Oh, come on.
I mean,
I'm willing to admit that certainly obviously the optimized viewing experience for almost any movie is in a theater.
But this is specifically a cinematic, like, you got to be in the fucking theater listening to
it's because of the soundtrack.
Synth sound, just shaking the whole fucking thing.
Okay. I mean,
it was awesome.
I buy that. I buy that, absolutely.
Someone should let Paramount know that because of their deal they made with Netflix for their international release.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they gave up on this movie, from what I understand. I'm also, James, I'm glad that you've read the book because I'm excited to talk because I haven't read the book, but it was just a movie to me. But I'm excited to hear more about the book.
All right, let's go with Austin.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty ambitious. Visually, it was interesting. See, I am in a similar boat with Jared. I had to watch it on my laptop because obviously I am in a Spanish territory at the moment. And so I had to wait for the international release. So I feel like I probably missed out on quite a bit of the cinematic experience, not being in a theater with a nice sound system and a big, massive projection screen. So, yeah, I nevertheless still thought it was pretty ambitious. I liked it. I didn't love it. I thought conceptually it was relatively interesting. But to be honest, and I know this isn't really a fair criticism, but I said it in a tweet, I think it made me really want to watch two films that I think were quite highly influential on this film, Melancholia and Stalker. And I feel like the emotional, conceptual, existential themes that those two films explore do it in a way that is much deeper, much more interesting, much more complex, much more mysterious, and much more ambiguous, which I think so many people are like kind of praising this film as being like so smart and ambiguous with that weird, elusive ending. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, man. It seems actually pretty self-explanatory to me.
Yeah. So I actually want to preface my opinion by saying that I saw Austin's tweet before watching the movie, and I looked at it and I said,
oh no, I influenced you.
No. Well, I mean, okay, so I love Stalker. I actually have a poster of Stalker in my apartment, and I said, Stalker and Melancholia, like, Austin, you pretentious douchebag. There's no way that this is actually in the, but you were absolutely right. I don't think I could think of two movies that, I guess that this movie aspires to be than those two movies. I think you were absolutely right.
Well, I can see Stalker, but Melancholia? How?
I guess
the looming threat of annihilation or the looming threat of elimination.
Well, it seemed like,
and then all the characters are these like broken, depressed people. One of them has cancer. One of them is suicidal. One of them has a kid that died, and they're all kind of going on this suicide mission for this like resignation of their inevitable doom, and they're almost
none of them really said
it
was a suicide mission. They all just kind of implied probably a suicide mission. I didn't feel the
no, they
impending
did.
sense
There
of
was a part where the main character's on the boat with the other girl, or with Natalie Portman, and she says something like, why would anybody want to go on a mission like this? I mean,
and then she responds, "So you think this is a suicide mission?"
But they qualify it as, not quite. The whole thing is like,
Right.
there's a difference between, there's like that important line where there's a difference between suicide and self-destruction. And so, I mean, anyway, so.
Well, and that's one of the central themes that the film explores that is quite interesting, right? So I'm sure we'll get into that more.
Yeah,
that relation between the two is central.
Anyway, my top level thing is that it's a cool concept, some cool visuals, but I find the film to be pretty frustrating.
Yeah.
And I think it's too frustrating to call profound. And the more I think about it, the more I think that it's all almost nonsense. I feel like on the one hand, the film over-explains some of its visual imagery and motifs, but then it obscures any potentially meaningful stuff behind a thick wall of I don't knows. There's a fair amount of I don't knows.
You don't know why the alien's doing any of this shit, really.
Yeah, I mean, I have a theory, but even my theories, I have a theory which we can get into later, but even my theories I don't think are substantiated in the text.
Yeah.
See, I like that, and we can get into it more, but I like that I don't know. And
well,
I guess ontological stuff that's going on.
You said that it was pretty clear.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is I do think it's clear.
It's clear it's clear in that no one knows, or the I don't know is clear.
Well, let's get into it after you do your synopsis. But yeah,
okay.
It's clear that the I don't know is signaling at something intentional. But yeah, okay, go ahead.
And if I could just one last thing before the recap, if I see another relationship scene with people tickling each other in bed, I'm gonna go crazy. Like I've seen that too many times, and I think
name others.
I can't name others. Fuck you, Ryan.
You've been put on the spot. There aren't any others. See? Yeah, no.
I mean, I just felt the relationship scenes are pretty trite, and I didn't really get the romance angle. I mean, it's certainly not a romance film, but I find myself asking, especially with the conclusion, with them embracing themselves in the last shot, like, what are we supposed to be getting out of this conclusion? But we'll talk about that in a second. Let me first go into the recap. So, it's been a year since biology professor Lena's husband Kane left for a top-secret military operation. She's just about to give up hope until one day he shows up disoriented and horribly ill. A military convoy abducts Lena and Kane and takes them to Area X, a covert military base set up to study the Shimmer, a mysterious effervescent dome originating at a lighthouse that threatens to swallow the whole planet. Kane is the only operative to ever return from its depths. Lena joins a crew of 4 other operatives and enters the Shimmer, where the preconceived notions of time, physics, and biology don't apply. Lena discovers that the genes of various wildlife and plants are being combined and mutated, and that the same kind of genetic merging not only happened to previous operatives, but to her own crew. As they venture farther toward the lighthouse, mutated beasts murder some of the crew, and their sanity starts to slip. Eventually, one of the operatives realizes that the shimmer acts as a prism that not only refracts light, but all DNA, including their own. Eventually, Lena reaches the lighthouse, where she discovers a video showing Kane killing himself next to what looks like a doppelganger. Venturing further into the depths of the lighthouse, Lena witnesses her commanding officer die, and an extraterrestrial being uses blood from Lena's face to manifest a humanoid body that mimics her movements. The body soon takes the shape of Lena. Lena uses a phosphorus grenade to burn the doppelganger and the lighthouse with it. The shimmer disappears, and Lena is debriefed by the military. Back at Area X, Lena confronts Kane. She asks him if he really is Kane, to which Kane says, "I don't know." Kane then asks if she is in fact the real Lena. They embrace, and the refracted nature of the shimmer gleams in both of their eyes. End of movie. All right, so there's a lot of stuff to break down here. Should we just start with the ending? Just get right into it, right into
Sure.
what we think is going on.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, spoilers. I just explained the whole movie.
Oh yeah, good point. Forgot about that.
So let's start with the new guys. Matthew, James, do you guys have any specific interpretations of what happens at the end scene and what we're supposed to take away from this movie?
I do a bit, and again, mine comes from the place of, again, not having read the books, which I think, well, the books, from what I understand, I bet you James will sort of touch on that, is that there's angles of this entire story that they just kind of drop 80% of. But I took the ending more as, when you see, especially like the very last shot where you see the same, soap bubbly shimmer in their eyes when they're hugging. That to me was like, basically now they are this thing, like they are the new thing that was created that will then possibly or whenever continue on and cause further annihilation. It's no longer this lighthouse. They're now the epicenter. However, I don't know if it did enough to make me care. That's really where I hit it. The ending, especially the whole scene in the lighthouse, the whole buildup, you find out Kane's not Kane most likely, and she might not be her. That to me, while I loved the visuals of it with some questionable physics on the CG model, listen, when they can't get something to fall down right, that's when I have a problem. When it doesn't, when a CG character doesn't have weight, I'm always like, and I'm done.
This is the video game designer thing coming out. Well, I know that that's James, but yeah, you guys seem to know your stuff.
But yeah, I mean, I've thought, honestly, which is interesting. I think it was Ryan. You said you loved the last last 40 minutes or so. That was the part that I had felt like the film hadn't given me enough of a beautiful world and an interesting sort of overarching story. Again, not really character-driven story up till that point, and then that point, the ending was like cool for me, and then I just sort of was like, it earned enough goodwill to get me through the problems I had with the sort of like middling, no real answer ending, and so I was cool with it. But then my friends have been like, "Oh, is there going to be a sequel now?" And I'm like, "There's not going to be a sequel."
No one saw this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with you. By the way, like why I say I love the end of the movie, and I do. It's not perfect up till then. They didn't really. It wasn't like a payoff for what you had seen set up. It's more just like, wow, this is a really cool scene. I haven't seen in a movie before. That's about what I was thinking.
James, what do you think?
For me, what did I get out of the ending? I got disappointment. So to me, the ending implies, as Matt said, that the creature has now become them, that, oh, this has been an unreliable narrator the entire time. You don't know what of their story is true. But fundamentally, the alien has escaped, right? We've fundamentally got a situation like body snatchers. And To me, that was highly disappointing because there were all these issues that they touched on within the film, especially as you said, this sort of biological urge to self-destruction that I thought were very powerful. This idea of humanity as a group of individuals acting as one compared to one organism acting as many. There were a lot of these things that they dealt with, and instead they wrap it up with a, oh, isn't it a crazy twist, right?
Right.
But I didn't feel like there was a lot of heft to that twist. I didn't feel like there was a lot of meaning I could draw from it, and so to me, that was a little bit disappointing.
Right. I agree. Austin, let's get into your theories.
So I think that there are two ways to read it. One, which would be a more Hegelian reading, and one would be a more Deleuzian reading. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So Hegel obviously talks about the dialectic, right? And we talk about that a lot on Wisecrack. The undergraduate version of the dialectic is that you have a thesis, right? Like black, and you have an antithesis, white, and then you have a synthesis. The two of them come together and they form gray. Gray then becomes the new thesis. So the thesis is gray, then there's a new antithesis, whatever the fuck it would be. Then they come together and they form a synthesis, and this process continues on forever, right? So at the end, the Hegelian reading of the film would be like, all right, so you got humans and you got alien, and then there's a synthesis, and then at the end, what they are in their state of are you Kane and are you Lena or whatever her name was, and then the I don't know is, well, then they're this new synthesis. They're not, it's not that the alien has necessarily taken over, and it's not that the human no longer exists. It's that both the identity of the alien, the identity of the human, and then the non-identity of the alien and the human are synthesized into one, right? Which is going to then just kind of proliferate forever. That's the Hegelian reading. The Deleuzian reading is the one that I actually think is better. And it's the idea that Deleuze and Guattari use this word called a rhizome. And a rhizome is basically like this lateral multiplicity of interpenetrating forces. And I think that's what you get with this alien force. Rather than it being like these two opposing forces that kind of come together and converge into this synthesis. And I know that's like a really like juvenile reading of the dialectic too. So philosophy buffs out there, I wish we can get into more complex stuff on Twitter, hit me up. But I think the Deleuzian reading is this idea that it's not this, it's not negation, but rather it's just the ubiquity of abundance or the ubiquity of life, which is why they talk about cancer, why they talk about pathology when they're first looking at the flowers inside or on the vine inside the shimmer. They talk about it being pathological. And then, of course, her research, Natalie Portman's research, is in like cells splitting and multiplying, the abundance of life. So it's too much of life rather than the negation of something. And so what this rhizome or the rhizome model indicates is that it's this radical proliferation, this pathological proliferation of abundance. And what that does is it scrambles the old identities. So the reason that the flowers are different on the vine is because they're creating new identities, new hierarchies, new forms. Any flower can bloom on any vine, and so far as there's some sort of cross-contamination or a cross-pollination, right? And then the same thing happens with the human and alien and the human and plant and the human and earth, which is why you get all of these weird tapestries of like human vine organic dirt things and structures that come together, or the beasts that echo or speak with the voice of something that it has connected with or made a connection with. And so that's what you get then at the end, is you get just this proliferation, this absolute unbounded, without any sort of needing the shimmer now, potential for this vital pathology to flow in the human world. And so Cain isn't the same Cain. Cain didn't come out. Some other multiplicity came out that just kind of bore some echoes of what Cain looked like, but neither did Lena come out the same, because there was, even though Cain came out and it was clear that his quote-unquote original body had been destroyed and that it was the copy that came out, and so he doesn't know if he's Cain. He kind of has this weird different identity. Lena's was different. Her name was Lena, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, hers was different because the copy was killed, but she came out. And what's being explored there is that both the copy and the original have now become some sort of simulacra.
Just to hold on for a second there, though, I'm not sure that the movie actually says that the copy was killed. I think you can also interpret it as the copy made it out, is sitting there relating the whole thing, because the entire thing is basically a flashback, a relation by the final Lena to interrogators who are human, right? And so I'm not sure that the end of the film is actually what happened, right? I think that we're getting a
unreliable narrator thing.
Yeah.
Oh, so you
I-
think that there's like a plan? That the only reason I would say I don't know about that is two things, and then this then requires that we trust what Lena said, but other people said it too. They said like, so what does it want, right? And they kept saying I don't know, and I think the point was is that it actually didn't want anything. The reason it didn't want anything was because it was pure drive, pure vital flow. It just kind of functioned in its multiplicity and in its proliferation of itself. So it didn't have an end goal where it was like, I'm going to manipulate them so that I can like infiltrate them. I don't think it even has that type of mentality, which is, but then again, that requires that we trust when people said, what does it want? And they kept saying, I don't know. I think I personally
But I also think just the idea that all the being did was copy her movements does suggest that it didn't know what it wanted. It was really just almost like playing around. You know, it didn't really seem to have an
unreflective
agenda.
life.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's just pure drive, you know? And so that's why I think the idea of the death drive is so kind of
Yeah, damn, I was
obviously
gonna
apparent
bring that up, man.
Okay, take two. Jared,
No.
hey, you were gonna bring something
It's
cool up,
it's
right?
okay. You're probably much better. I was actually not going to get to that yet, but so I had said earlier that kind of the heavy-handed. So this movie is one of those movies where, and this is another trope that I'm not a big fan of, is when you have like the heavy-handed, thematically expository discussion. So like, you know, it opens with her teaching a class about cells, and we now know that, okay, cells or like this idea of division is going to become relevant in the rest of the movie. You know, it's like a big thematic bookend. Which, I mean, I don't really hate that much if it's done well. Like, I think one of
Like
the
an
movies...
Indiana Jones.
Haven't seen it in a while. I think like Half Nelson is a great idea. Half Nelson is actually a movie that is literally about the dialectic. I don't know if anyone has seen that.
I love that movie.
But I don't really think that this discussion of cells really contextualizes the film's themes. So we're meant to believe, so she says, the rhythm of the dividing pair, which becomes the structure for every microbe, blade of grass, sea creature, land creature, and human. So later... You know, what Jennifer Jason Leigh's character says, you're a biologist. Isn't self-destruction coded into us, programmed in each cell? So that thematically we can understand that, all right, so the nature of all reality or all biological organisms is to continue to divide, to self-destruct. And that's what we see happening in all the characters. So we have Lena's cheating on her husband, compromising her marriage. Kane goes on this suicide mission because he knows about the affair. There's what do all the other people do? So Lena goes into the zone or whatever. That's in Stalker. It's called the zone, but because she owed him the shimmer. Yeah. So like one girl's an addict, one is suicidal, one lost a child. Jennifer Jason Leigh's character kind of hints that she smoked and drank until she had cancer. So, like, I think so, but then it just kind of ends there. I don't think that, you know, this idea of division, of the self-destructive nature really connects into what the Shimmer or the alien force is doing, which I think is really disappointing.
Here's an interesting, or at least interesting to me, thought. So if this is true, like if the whatever the being is, and I'm hesitant to call it an alien, whatever this thing is sort of representing life's, and again, not desire, but ability to just not to continue and change and duplicate, continue, change, duplicate. The fact that the film itself doesn't actually give us a reason. This is, I might be making excuses for the filmmakers at this point, but like the film itself is doing, as far as the narrative is concerned, being told to us exactly what the quote creature is doing with all of biological life. Like
Yes.
it's just continuing on. There's no reason. It's just continuing on. So like, you know, that might be a little bit of Monday morning quarterbacking, I hear, as a sports term people use. But I don't know. There's something oddly comforting in that theory to me of just life not necessarily having a important meaning, or a film not having an important sort of like overall, like, this is what we're saying at the end, but something that like, oh no, this is just a thing that happens.
Well,
that the characters we like went through.
I saw that contrast and juxtaposition serving to present this idea that the film is trying to say, which is that the drive towards self-destruction is what gives us purpose, right? You look at these things, you have a purposeless entity, which is the zone, which is all it's doing is continuing to grow. The zone does not have a drive to self-destruction. At no point is the zone biology is going to break down, right? And then you have these 4 characters who all have 5 characters, whatever it was, who all have a severe drive. In fact, their only characterization is basically their various drives to self-destruction, but that's also what gives them all purpose, right? And so I thought we were setting that juxtaposition up side by side in the film in order to make the point about whether or not I agree with it, that this drive to self-destruction is what, as humanity, gives us purpose versus this other entity which just grows.
So let's go into the death drive, because I think we're kind of already talking about that. So,
Hey, actually, Jared, sorry to cut you off. Can we do a quick swap of the power supplies on one of the phones? I guess we're low on battery.
sure.
We're still
Is it a
recording.
smoker's cough that I hear in there somewhere?
Vapors cough, dude.
All good?
Real quick, Jared, I have a question about the unreliable narrator theory.
Well, let's just finish this real quick.
All right, go for it.
So the death drive is a Freudian term that describes an individual's drive toward death or self-destruction. It's a desire for like the peace and serenity of inanimate life, like your mother's womb, or death. So as I explained earlier, all the all the characters self-destruct. And I would say that the film is permeated by this feeling of melancholy. And I don't know if this is going too far. Austin, would you say, and I'm calling out Austin because I feel like he's the one who might go this far with me, but the hole inside the lighthouse kind of is shaped like a womb.
You mean the cosmic butthole of the universe?
I didn't even think about that.
I love that part.
Maybe. Keep going. I like it.
So yeah, I'll just read one of the lines. Why did my husband volunteer for a suicide mission? And then Jennifer Jason Leigh says, you're confusing suicide with self-destruction. Almost none of us commit suicide. Almost all of us self-destruct in some form or another. We drink, we smoke, we destabilize the good job, the good marriage. These aren't decisions, they're impulses. And so the reason I'm bringing this up, and more to the point of the death drive and the sense of melancholy and how Austin was connecting it to the Von Trier film Melancholia. I think we most clearly see that in Jennifer Jason Leigh's character Ventress, especially at the beginning. She's always fidgeting, looking at her hands, she's doodling, and just sounding really unenthused and whispering, I guess because she has terminal cancer. She really is the one that has the most melancholic resignation toward the inevitability of death. So I think that the whole Melancholia thing is most present there. Now... now I'm going to get to my ending or my theory about the ending, which, by the way, doesn't work. So what I'm about to say, I think, is not right, but I want it because I was tempted to find meaning. It's unfulfilling for the alien just to come and to have not really any kind of a purpose, and for the fact that he's refracting DNA within the shimmer is just arbitrary. It's really just a cool sci-fi trope that
Right.
allows for some cool visuals. So my theory is kind of based in the second to last shot of the movie. So there's those doors that are split in half. I don't know if you guys remember this, but basically while they're embracing, we see the doors to, I guess, the contamination chamber or wherever they are close. And it's pretty much split down the middle of the frame. And we see that at the end, when the door is closed, they're framed on the right side of the thing. So if we're to continue this theme of division, of cellular division, one becoming two, there is this sense of unity at the end, visually. There's also, earlier on in the movie, there's a shot where they're both reading. It's a flashback where Kane and Lena are reading. She's reading some biology book, and they're framed on opposite sides of the frame. It's like a wide shot, and there's kind of this emphasis of division. So... my theory is that the alien wanted to cure humanity of this divisive nature, of this sense of self-destruction. So when we see that visual cue at the end, it perhaps suggests that the relationship is no longer refracted, no longer divided. We're meant to believe that no matter who they are, whether they are Kane or not, whether they are Lena or not, they will have a more successful relationship. They'll get over the whole thing with the affair and their relationship problems. And so when I think about a spectrum and I think about a prism, we classically think of a prism as, a single white beam of light goes through the prism and then it's dispersed into, the various colors of the color wheel. I'm horrible with science. I'm probably fucking this up. But my theory was that this is what I was thinking when I was watching the movie and in the end kind of shat on it. But the alien wanted to reverse this process, to basically take the spectrum and put it back into a prism and make it one thing, to heal humanity of its self-destructive, divisive nature. And then my last point to this theory that does not work is that the name Cain, I thought, was kind of reminiscent of Cain and Abel, kind of the first murder and the archetypal narrative of man's destructive nature. So those were pieces that I was trying to build this idea of what the point of the aliens thing is, what the point of the shimmer is, why does the shimmer work in the way it does, why does the point of this movie is. Why does it refract DNA for other reasons than just like it's a cool motivation for visuals? And that was all I was able to come up with. And once again, I don't think it works. You can poke holes in that all day, but I just wanted to say it because that's the best I can come up with. What do you guys think?
Well, maybe it isn't so much that this alien force wanted to do that, but that it just simply does do that. And the reason that it simply does do that is because life just simply does that. And so that maybe if you could take a kernel or a moral kernel out of this, it's the idea that, hey, guess what? Biologically, all of these identities and all of these traumas and all of these symptomatic experiences of life that cause us towards this death drive, that really that we can transcend them, or we can undercut them, or we can subvert them, because biology just simply produces these types of things, because that's just simply the way life is. It scrambles the codes and the identities and always gives us an opportunity to create new codes and new identities. So maybe it's just this blind process that just de facto like unscrambles the codes and then rescrambles them in a new pattern.
So would you say that life finds a way? Is that what you're?
Yeah. I actually read. I think I read a review where they actually totally because they do. Did they talk about chaos theory in this film? I can't remember.
They could have. I would have just been like, yeah, this makes sense. They're talking about this right now. But
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, in a way, life finds a way. Like it just. And I think what Dr. Malcolm was trying to get at is that that life just simply functions, and it does so maybe not because it has a teleological or some sort of like impelling idea of exactly how to do it, but it fucking figures it out by just doing different things. You can't suppress life completely. All you can do is encounter it in different formations.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that more to my point about how, oftentimes when we have scientific exposition or people talking about science, usually it's relevant later on. But there's that. You guys remember the scene where Cain and Lena are in bed and they talk about God doesn't make mistakes. If you take a cell and circumvent the Hayflick limit, it confronts an essence. It means cells don't grow old. It becomes immortal. It keeps dividing, doesn't die. We see aging as a natural process, but it's actually a fault in our genes. This is the kind of thing that, like, first of all, not the greatest, most natural dialogue between a couple. And so if it's not that,
They're
then
scientists.
it should be pointing toward, well, only one of them's a scientist, but it should be pointing towards something thematically. And I just don't think that it really does. Unless, what do you guys think?
I mean, I think it's a bunch. It's a bunch of just flowery intellectual language around, yeah.
That's not good.
I know it's not. It's not. They didn't do a good job of writing this movie.
I mean, the writing to me was pretty weak in this film, but in that particular case, I mean, I think it was a ham-handed way to get back to this idea that self-destruction is a hard-coded part of us, that this falling apart is part of human nature on every level, including the biological level, and that when they go into the shimmer, they're dealing with something that doesn't have that urge, right? Doesn't have that coded into its DNA in the way that we do, right? And since this entire thing was about functionally people falling apart, I feel like that's what they were trying to get at. I feel like it was a very maladroit attempt at doing so, but I do feel like any time where you have that type of scientific language that ham-handedly put into a scene, they're trying to tell you, hey, look, this is the point. it just wasn't a particularly good
But
one.
I also think that the point would have been better if she's saying, God doesn't make mistakes, and then he said, I'm pretty sure he does. It would be a lot better if the alien was trying to fix the mistake. But I don't think, once again, I feel like maybe that was in an earlier draft, and I'd actually be curious to hear what James says about the book. But I guess my point is, by just, throwing everything away behind a bunch of I don't knows, it just makes it deliberately cryptic but when we have this basically nonsensical ending that's deliberately cryptic, and then when we try to recontextualize all these, ham-fisted biological expositions, then it's just like, okay, now this is just bad dialogue that doesn't point to anything. This sucks.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
But yeah, I want to hear about the book, James.
I was just going to say, I mean, part of my issue was exactly what you bring up. In the book, it's actually fairly explicit that, at least in the first book, right? They do a lot more later on, but in the book Annihilation, it's made fairly explicit that there is sort of a purpose to this zone. And the zone itself, actually, there's a biological language which the characters decrypt, which sort of allows the zone to speak. And really, the zone's purpose is simply to lay out the myriad of possibilities for life that were sort of the paths we didn't go down. And there's this famous passage, I mean, probably the most famous passage in the book, is when they first decrypt this language and they're reading it on the wall of this inverted tower, this cave. The lighthouse in the movie is this weird mashup of the lighthouse in the book and this cave, this inverted tower that they spend so much time in the book. And that also didn't work for me for a bunch of reasons. But when they finally decrypt this thing, it goes, where lies the strangling... Sorry, let me try that again. Where lies the strangling fruit that came from the hands of the sinner? I shall bring forth the seeds of the dead to share with the worms that gather in the darkness and surround the world with the power of their lives, while from the dim-lit halls of other places, forms that never were and never could be writhed for the impatience of the few who never saw what could have been. And to me, that passage is just talking about the fact that this thing has an urge to sort of show us, and is trying to show us all the other forms of life that we take for granted because they don't exist but could have existed, and that our particular form is not actually special in any way, right? Is a random roll of the dice, and that all these other ways could have existed, and yet we see everything through our own human lens, through sort of our own biological imperatives, and very rarely stop to consider all the other sort of nature's biological imperatives that could have been.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because that kind of, I think that fits into what I was thinking about with the when I called it like the Deleuzian ending, and it's that idea that that life itself is just pure potential, pure potency, pure multiplicity, and that the various, like you call them, the various throws of the dice, which actually Deleuze talks about quite a bit, the idea of the throw of the dice. But with every throw of the dice, some new formation, some new pattern, some new, what Deleuze and Guattari would call machinic assemblage. Some assemblage has come together. But that assemblage isn't necessary. It could have been otherwise, and it's always scrambling itself and actually becoming otherwise as it refracts various other assemblages that are encountering it. And so what this shimmer does is it sort of just intensifies that. It just magnifies that. It is that. It is that, what I called earlier, that rhizome, that lateral dispersion of that potency of life, which is cancer, right? I mean, that's what cancer is, and cancer is the abundance of life. And when you have too much life, here's the weird juxtaposition: it creates death, and what it creates death in is those former assemblages that you thought were necessary. So, so that's why Jennifer Jason Leigh's amazing call out of the title of the movie when she says annihilation is the sort of end goal. It's not annihilation as such. It's not like pure nothingness. It's the annihilation of what you understand in your phenomenological or existential or personal or whatever psychological experiences.
So can I stop and talk about that moment in the film for a second?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Because All right, I'm going to go back to the book, but this was a hugely important. There's a whole bunch of changes, right? A book doesn't begin with "it was aliens." It doesn't have that whole comet scene. The zone isn't as covert as it is here. There's been a bunch of teams that have gone in. People know about it. The opening section, they're not. She's not like kidnapped by the government and brought to this black site. And the opening section with her husband is way creepier and makes more sense. But this is all leading to. Also, the organization that runs the zone is a lot creepier. And do you guys remember at the beginning of the film, they enter the Shimmer, and then all of a sudden their camp's sort of set up, and that's a weird thing, and it's never touched on again in the film?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
So in the book, and this is a hugely important part of the book, in order to try and keep people sane and to control them within the zone, the psychologist is actually sent with the team because she's regularly hypnotizing them to make them lose time and lose memory. And so the book is chopped up that they haven't told any of the other members of the group that this is what's happening. And so in the relating of this story, it's very desynced, right? There's a lot of temporal chops that happen when the characters just lose time because the psychologist is covertly hypnotizing them and making them lose memories.
That's totally different. I mean, that literally changes, I think, a really important part of the film, where in the film, you think that it's just simply an effect of being in the Shimmer, which
Yeah.
I think...
And
That's way more
totally
like
different.
Stalker.
Right. And
Right.
oh God, I want to talk about like roadside picnic stalker connections to this, but just one other thing to bring up, getting back to your point about when she says the word annihilation. In the book, the psychologist, the main character eventually finds the psychologist at the lighthouse, and the psychologist starts shouting annihilation, and she just shouts it over and over, and the character is surprised, but eventually it comes out that annihilation is the key word that's supposed to. They've all been hypnotized and sort of psychologically manipulated into, if the psychologist says annihilation, it's a suicide trigger. They're supposed to kill themselves when they hear the word annihilation. And so that's why the psychologist says it. It's the last fallback, right? This programmed in human annihilation, but not programmed in biologically, programmed in terms of by other human beings. And so that's why the term annihilation comes up by the psychologist in the book, which killed me when it's used here, but you don't get that context.
Well, not only that, but I think even just within the text of the movie, I don't even think it makes sense at all. Because to Natalie Portman's point at the end, she says it wasn't destroying anything, it was changing everything, making something new. And before Jennifer Jason Leigh says annihilation, she says our minds and bodies will be fragmented into their smallest part till not one part remains, annihilation. To me, that's not even consistent with the logic of the Shimmer that we've been told. The Shimmer refracts, it mixes, it mutates. I don't even see the annihilation connection. I don't even understand the title of the movie, to be honest.
Well, it's the annihilation. It's the annihilation of the self, right? It's the disintegration of the ego. I think there's a Buddhist reading of this film where you could see it as the sort of complete elimination of ego and desire and therefore suffering. And so what you get is an annihilation of your self-experience. But it is.
But is that really what we end up having if once again the end of the dialectic is these two people who are embracing at the end who just don't recognize themselves?
Right.
What indication do we have that there really is some sort of annihilation of the ego or of the self? They just seem to not really recognize themselves. But other than that, we don't really have any indication of how exactly they're different.
So they
because
don't.
They're not. It's not Cain anymore. It's not the old Cain. This is that identity has been fragmented, and it's been mixed. It's been there's like this
But how is that not just a new identity?
relation.
They got snakes in their bellies.
Yeah, right.
Well, because it is a new identity, and that's the point. So Deleuze and Guattari use these two terms, deterritorialization and reterritorialization, to describe the movement of this rhizome that I was talking about, which fits well with cancer and the proliferation of just boundless life, just life, right, reduplicating itself and kind of attaching itself to everything else. Not a perfect model, but close enough. And that means with every disintegration of an identity, there's a simultaneous recreation of a new identity. So it's this idea of like a creative destruction almost.
Right. No,
so, yeah,
but like to
me,
me, that's not annihilation. Annihilation is truly, like the word nihil is in it. It's like, complete destruction. Right. There is no creation.
Well, the shimmer's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's going to annihilate everything.
Right, but if we're to believe Natalie Portman's line at the end, it's that it's making something new, not annihilating. Annihilation to me is just like complete abyss.
Well, the people
nothingness.
think that it's annihilation. I mean, it's our perception of this shimmer getting bigger.
But when you have one of the characters, saying the line of the movie, I'd like it to not be a mistake.
Oh well,
the physics though. The physics definition of annihilation is the conversion of matter into energy, especially mutual conversion of a particle and an antiparticle into electromagnetic radiation. So if you're looking at it from the physics definition as opposed to just sort of the general like destruction or complete obliteration of something, maybe it makes more sense, but the interesting thing I found, and this gets into a little bit more of sort of the meta of the making of the film and how we're talking about all this stuff, even these theories and whatnot, they're probably all not either correct or complete, because this film itself is an example of integration. So you have these books that then Paramount opts for, right? They're going to put their own little spins on things. Then you have the director, Alex Garland, right, who is trying to make one film where I believe, and this is all conjecture, but he wanted to make sort of a more heady film, and they did test screenings and said, well, this is too basically highbrow for people. So there was sort of going back and forth with him in the studio about how the ending was, and he wouldn't budge here and they wouldn't budge there. So we get this sort of amalgamation of a ton of different ideas, stuff from the book, using the word annihilation, but not as the keyword, dropping that whole subplot out of the book, but still keeping them losing time because someone liked that element of it. And it's interesting to me, even just from a filmmaking perspective, that the reasons why we feel like this thing might not come together the best way that it possibly should, or have at least one or two definitions or meanings that it could actually have, is actually what the movie is talking about. Like it's showing when you mash a whole bunch of stuff together, we get something new, and it might not make sense.
It's the meta reading.
I like that. I usually do the meta stuff in this podcast, and I love that.
Sorry.
No. I didn't have that idea. Please, I'm grateful for you bringing that up. That's pretty awesome.
That is awesome. I was gonna say, I think there's a psychoanalytic reading of this to kind of like to maybe wrap up this bit that I was trying to say earlier, and then kind of responding to you just a minute ago, Jared, and it sort of latches on to what we were just saying there, Matthew, with kind of the meta point. Is that the psychoanalytic reading might argue that, okay, so there are two networks of power, let's say. There's the alien network of power, and then there's the human, right? The human is characterized by reflection. We want answers. We want to study stuff and then bring it back so we can figure it out. All of these military people want to know, what does it want? What does it want? They want to incorporate this other thing into the symbolic order, right? They want to put a language on it, or they want to put a word on it, they want to describe it, they want to incorporate it or appropriate it into the symbolic order that characterizes the human network. The other network, the alien network, doesn't have that. It is this, potentially, if it is this boundless, mindless flow of multiplicities that is just going to reduplicate itself endlessly. So the idea of annihilation isn't annihilation as such in terms of the nothingness, but rather it's the annihilation entirely of the symbolic order. So what you get in this final embrace of these two new assemblages is that they are just one particular, let's say, snapshot in the complete unfolding of the process of perpetual annihilation that will ultimately be the end, as life, the alien network, completely proliferates and becomes ubiquitous, taking over all of humanity on Earth, thereby destroying the symbolic order. Not necessarily destroying life, because it would be some sort of new, more complex network of life itself, but nevertheless, the annihilation is the annihilation of the symbolic, the annihilation of the ego, the annihilation of all self, that will eventually take place, because that's what will happen based on how the alien network flows.
I don't know how aware you are of how tangential to meta you're getting, because now I feel like we're saying that, if the alien is annihilating the symbolic order, then that justifies the fact that the ending doesn't really point to anything, because it annihilates the symbolic order of how a movie should conclude.
Boom. Boom.
We can't show you the meaning of this movie, unfortunately. I actually have my theory of the ending is different than all y'all's, and what when I first saw it, when they're embracing and then her eyes are becoming like the bubble thing.
Yeah.
To me that was like, it wasn't that, oh, she's been this the whole time and she walked out of the shimmer like that. To me, it was like she like contracted it from Oscar Isaac. Like that's the way I took it, was that it was like she destroyed the shimmer by herself. What we saw was what was happening, because I hadn't really thought about the unreliable narrator thing until you just mentioned it. But then when she's in that room, she's a little disoriented because she was in the shimmer. But then she goes, "Oh shit, Oscar Isaac, my lover, is in that other room, and I think that he's part of the shimmer still, but I love him so much, and so I'm going to go over into this room and basically." Potentially wreak havoc on humanity just because I love my husband so much. That's how I took it.
Of course.
And then I know. Well, now that I'm hearing all y'all say this, I'm like, well, that was obviously probably wrong. She walked out of
but dismissing the unreliable narrator thing, we do see throughout the movie that she's looking under the microscope at her own blood, and she sees that she's infected.
Right.
So I don't even think we need to
true.
to say that gets infected by Oscar Isaac, because it's proven to us that she gets infected in the zone or the shimmer.
Even to say she's infected implies that there's a distinction. And I think that that's the point, is that there is no distinction. It's not she's infected. She no longer exists as she, and this new identity is something else.
Well, then, so she's, going along that lines, and with the unreliable narrator thing, so you're telling me that she is this new thing, but she's still like kind of lying. She has the wherewithal to manipulate this whole Black Ops gang, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, do we know that she's manipulating them?
Well, to me, that's kind of what it's implying. If we're saying that she's lying about telling her story to them.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's interesting. I wasn't thinking along that line, because I'm not sure that I buy the unreliable narrator thing.
I think if it's go ahead. If it's unreliable narration, I don't think it is the act of the new Lena purposely obfuscating her information. It is the act of new Lena being asked questions she might actually no longer have the entire answer to. And so that's why we get the I don't know, it doesn't want anything, that sort of like half answers or side answers, because at this point in time, because again, we've been set up at the beginning of this film that it's all the men in hazmat suits talking to her in the chair, not wearing a hazmat suit. Side note, no scientist ever wore a hazmat suit in the shimmer, so all of them wearing them outside, sure. But so she's been bringing us along, like that's the first scene we sort of see other than the lighthouse. So we know now that Lena in the chair is the one that seemingly is driving the story. And if we find out at the end of the film that Lena in the chair is not really originally Lena, it's possible that all the stuff that we've been told from her, not from a nefarious point of view, but just from a I'm new and I don't know what's going on sort of point of view, her perception could be skewed. So I think that's the only way that the unreliable narration kind of works.
That's very interesting.
First off, my SD card just died on my external recorder, so I'm gonna have to start up again. Can we do another clap?
Yeah. Did it just die?
It died a few minutes ago.
Okay, but you haven't said anything since then?
No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no problem.
So that'll be clean.
No problem.
Should we stop recording, all of us, and then
I think we
start, or
do we
keep going, right?
Yeah,
we
let's just
should-
do
we
a
should
real
keep
quick
going.
other clap so we can
Yeah.
sync up. Here, I'm gonna put my headphones right next to this thing.
Oh,
I'm also, everybody, I don't know how if you keep time code or not. I'm keeping time code of sort of important moments. For instance, when the clap there was a mic hit once. When we patched back from the break of the one microphone, I could write it down on mine if you want to use the time code on my file as like a guide.
It'll be totally fine. We can still sync it from the clap, but thank you so much for doing that.
Yep.
All right,
my earbuds. I'm ready for the second clap.
All right. James, you ready?
Yep, totally ready.
All right.
Wait, I might have lied. Let me see. It doesn't seem to have actually gotten any audio right now. Give me 2 seconds. I believe I know what's going on. Let me see if I can fix that.
Hold for another clap. Hold for another clap. Whoever's editing this later, I love you. I appreciate your hard work. Thank you very much.
I will be doing that edit, so thank you so much.
And we're still live on YouTube. Hey, guys.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Hey, what's up, YouTube?
Behind the scenes.
I hope you are enjoying the technical difficulties.
Yeah.
We are almost there.
Hey, if we're live on YouTube, hit us up on Wisecrack at Twitter, or hit me up, Austin_Hayden, and let us know what other movies would benefit from a main character screaming out the title of the movie.
Yeah. Mine was
Jaws. He's over there.
Mine was Don't Be a Menace to South Central while you're drinking your juice in the hood.
Call me by your name.
Well, that actually happens.
I know, but I want him to yell it. I want him to yell it.
All right, so now I should be ready.
All right, another
Okay,
clap.
Hold on 1 second here. I gotta get my things ready too. All right, I'm ready for a clap.
All right.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool.
So going back to what you guys were saying, I think the question that's interesting to me is, if we accept that at the end of the film, Lena is not Lena, at what point in the film is Lena not Lena, right? Is it at the very end of the film? Is it when she encounters the creature? Is it when she realizes she's changed by the zone? Or is it when he leaves, right? Is it before she ever enters this zone? At what point, I mean, because we have this idea of that's reinforced by the back and forth on video between Kane and his other self, of a character, of a person not being who they are. And yet, at what point is Lena not Lena, right? Because we have a lot of points that could be in this film.
Maybe the second I think according to the logic of the film, if kind of what we've been talking about, or the bullshit that I've been spouting, is relatively accurate, then the second she walks into the shimmer, she's Lena plus, right? Yep. So it's not
Lena
that she's
plus.
not Lena. In a way, she's not Lena, but if we're gonna stick with the Hegelian argument, would be she's not Lena, right? She's not Lena. There's this new identity, whatever. The Deleuzian, and I think what fits better with this film, this idea of cancer, this idea of pathology, this idea of pure positive abundance, would be that she's like extra Lena, you know,
Right.
like Lena plus, which then is also not Lena. At the
And
same
she's
time.
always she's continually changing. She's never the same Lena from moment to moment.
Right.
If you want to go from the logic of the film, the closer they get to the epicenter of the shimmer, more and more like stronger prismatic sort of shifts are happening with everything around them, to the point by the end on the beach there's trees made of glass from the sand. Like
exactly.
That's cool. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it.
I was going to say, I think that's really interesting. I just wish that we actually experienced and saw that development with Natalie Portman's character. Like, I don't really think she changes much. We don't really see her psyche slip. We don't see her making any kind of different decisions. We don't see her disposition toward her husband changing.
We see her eyeballs change, dude.
I think that's important because I don't think Lena is Lena during any point of this film. I think Lena was only Lena before the film started. Basically, the
framing device forces us to think that.
Well, not only in that sense, you can go back and say the person who Lena knows as Lena is the person who existed before Kane left.
It's an unreliable narrator about...
Right, but the first scene of the movie we see is her being debriefed by the military, so everything that we see is through that lens.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
very clearly, at any point, we're not seeing the Lena on a biological sense. We know that we never see anything as Lena in that sense. But I mean, I think I would argue that since this whole thing is about self-destruction, right? Where does she pick up the self-destructive urge? At least as we're told through the narrative, the self-destructive urge is acquired, right? At the point at which Kane doesn't come back, and then that changes who she is, right? Like everybody in the college sequence says, "Oh, go back to being the person you were," effectively, right? Like it's time to move on. It's time to get back to being you, and she doesn't, right? And she can't.
Well, I would argue that the self-destruction does start earlier, because I believe that we're meant to think that her self-destructive urge is her tendency to have that affair. And the affair happens before he leaves, because Kane leaves because he's aware of the affair, and he's just like, fuck, I'm depressed. I'm going to go on this suicide mission because my wife loves someone else.
That's really?
Yeah, that's how I took it.
Oh. I didn't. I took it that she was having or that she started fucking that guy after Kane left because she thought he was dead.
No, because he says, oh, do they know? He's like, I don't know if they know. And then there's that flashback to him leaving, and
he's super bummed.
And we're meant to believe that because because Lena suspects that he knows that's the reason why he goes, and that's what Lena means when she says, I'm going to the Shimmer because I owe him. And what she means by I owe him is that I cheated on him, I forced him into this suicide or self-destructive mission, so now I'm going to do it too.
Damn, I missed so much. I was too high during that movie.
That's why you enjoyed it. I was stone cold sober.
It is pretty funny that the general consensus from everyone who saw it not high was the same.
Yeah. There needs to be like a disclaimer, like,
Definitely watch this movie stoned.
Please take out your vape.
Austin,
to be fair, I was a little stoned when I saw it. So
on your laptop, though.
There goes our control group.
Honestly, Austin, though, you said that once she enters the Shimmer, she becomes like extra Lena, right?
Right.
But then, so if she was going to be extra Lena the second she went into the Shimmer, but then once her blood went into the cosmic butthole, and then she became there was like Lena 2 all of a sudden, right? Is extra Lena going to, given enough time, would extra Lena kind of look exactly like Lena 2, kind of the robot-y version of Lena, or is that
I don't know.
I mean, kind of, because those are two different beings, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, they're two different bodies, let's say.
Yeah.
So, or they're two different. I used this word before, but like machinic assemblages. They're two different assemblages, right? They're two different networks. But I don't know that they're necessarily, I don't know, two different beings. Because what does that mean? Are they of the same essence, which is just like this vital force, whatever it is, this life, this alien thing? Maybe it's all one being, but with various modes or various different expressions. I don't know how you would think about it, but yeah, maybe that's it. So I would say that if the logic of the film does work the way that I'm thinking, then it's like the second she walks in, it's Lena plus, then that means the very next second, or even temporally speaking, you can't really quantify it, but let's just say that at every moment, however we're going to try to measure it, that it's a new plus, right? So it's Lena plus, then Lena plus plus, then Lena plus plus plus, then Lena plus 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 plus, and then all of those various different pluses are. So that means that with every step, with every night she spends, there are all these multiplications of the self. So it's this sort of like perpetual transformation of the network that we used to call, and that maybe we still call Lena.
So I was interested in this idea that you're saying about the about seeing it as additions rather than, say, changes, right? Because the way that I saw most of the creatures in this story, it was much more sort of your old boat, right? You're replacing a plank, and eventually, do you have a whole new boat, right?
Right. Or the human body. Every 7 years, our cells regenerate, and we're physically a different entity.
Right. And so, but I see that just happening in a much more rapid sense here, where we're removing one piece from the core entity, if you will, and replacing it with a patched in piece of something else. And over time, we're losing the distinction of the core entity.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would say is what do we do to stick with the metaphor of the boat? What do you do with the old piece that you replaced? I would say that what this film is offering is a picture, rather than like taking off the board and then putting a new one in where that one was taken out, they're just like adding layers perpetually, endlessly. And so that's what you get with the cancer metaphor, is
and
that
eventually, yeah, the boat sinks.
Well, yeah, and then it sinks. Well, and then it takes a new form and it becomes a submarine. You know, I mean, and then you get the same thing. But that's what happens when you get endless growth of life, which is why cancer is pathological. Is that it just simply keeps growing. It is pure excess of life, and this is and I know that when we kind of talk about abstract stuff like the debates in philosophy, it's really exciting. Trust me, guys, this debate between Deleuzians and Hegelians is really fun. But it really centers around this idea of negation and what happens with the idea of negativity itself. Whereas that would be like the Hegelian thing. They want to espouse an idea, an ontology, which is like a theory of being, right? They want the negative. Whereas Deleuzians are like, no, it's just all.
Did we lose Austin?
Damn.
He's still on there. Let's see. Let me.
Did we lose
I
everybody?
think I lost you guys. Nope,
Oh.
I'm back, I think.
All right, so we got James. Matthew, are you still there?
Hang on.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, YouTube.
Oh, I'm just getting a G chat from Matt. Give me a sec.
It's weird how we lost both of them.
Yeah, that was
Yes,
really
I'm-
strange.
Oh, Austin's back.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Did you know
was
that you
still-
cut out?
I didn't know until after I finished, and there was just silence. And I figured either you guys just think I'm a fucking idiot, or I'm so brilliant that you guys needed a minute to respond,
Yeah.
I'll go with
Or-
the second one. You won.
Yeah.
or everything just cut out technologically, and the universe was conspiring against me.
Well, how was it? Do you think that you really said something profound? Should we go again?
Well, the people in the podcast are going to have to tell us. The listeners are going to have
Well,
to
they
decide.
didn't hear it, so.
No, they did.
Oh.
He's recording it still.
In the,
Oh,
in the
that's
edited
right. That's right. That's right. The
Yeah.
edited version. Fuck me.
Only we haven't heard it.
Yeah, we don't
All right,
know.
so let me just get a good.
No, basically-
let me just get a
basically
good.
the-
Wow.
Yeah, the
All right, now we can edit that in.
Whoa, dude.
Oh
man.
shit, man.
Hadn't thought about it like that.
Do we have that sound effect on our little noise pad?
Oh, man, we don't have the noise pad
We
today,
don't
have
damn
it
it.
today.
We forgot. Fuck.
Oh, damn it. No,
So
but
anyway,
basically, just
we're-
to sum up what I said real quick was basically that's why I think that there are two ways that's interesting to read this film. You've got like is there a destruction of life ever, which was like wrestling with the negative, or is it just pure abundance of life? Like, are you replacing a plank and then putting a new plank in, or are you just simply adding planks? And I said that's why I think the film, there are those two interpretive schemas that you can use to interpret the film.
So I want to ask James one last question before we move on to the mailbag. Are you aware, is the book at all, I know that Stalker is also based on a book. Is the book at all based on that? Is there any kind of indication of like a nod towards Stalker? I mean, the movie especially, I mean, The Zone looks exactly like The Shimmer, like the visuals, everything. I mean, it's pretty uncanny, and I'm curious if there's any indication of that within the book.
Well, what kills me, so I don't know if there was a direct, I mean, I'm assuming that he's read Roadside Picnic. It clearly looks like it has an influence on this. What kills me is everything we've talked about here is solved in Roadside Picnic in a way that it was not solved in this film. Because the whole point of Roadside Picnic is it is irrelevant, right? The zone in Stalker, in Roadside Picnic, culminates in that line where he talks about, well, what if there isn't a point? What if this was just aliens stopping by for a roadside picnic and this is just all the trash they left, right? Like, imagine how animals see us when a family pulls up, has a picnic, leaves their garbage on the ground, packs back up in their car and gets going. There's no rhyme or reason, but these all seem like amazing artifacts, wonderful things to these much lesser beings that that can't possibly even understand them. And maybe that's what happened here, right? And I love that understanding of Roadside Picnic that is left out of the film here.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, so we are going to move on to the mailbag. Ryan, do you have some questions picked out?
I have a few.
Cool, let's do it.
All right. Here we go. Sorry, let me pull them up. And
While you're looking for them, can I just say on the Deleuze stuff, I couldn't, every time you said Deleuze, I kept hearing, my favorite line in Deleuze is when he's like, do cats eat bats, or do cats eat bats, or do bats eat cats? Really, it's the same thing. And I was like, yep, that's Annihilation right there.
Yeah, that's great.
first message is from Kevin. He says, since you guys are movie buffs, just like the rest of us that listen to this wonderful podcast, I was wondering what you guys think of the Oscar outcomes. And also, why does Christopher Nolan always get the short end of the stick when it comes to those awards? In my mind, he's one of the best directors out there.
Well,
Wow.
I have not watched the Oscars in 10 years. I couldn't care less, to be honest.
Well, I thought it was cool that the fish sex movie won, fish monster sex movie won Best Picture, and that'll
Grinding
be there
Nemo?
forever. And that, yeah, Grinding Nemo. That's so yeah, that was cool. Jordan Peele's award was cool. Anyone else? What did you guys think?
Yeah, I don't give a fuck. I think that it's
We're pretentious
It's,
assholes here.
So
well, I mean, I don't mind the idea of rewarding good work and rewarding hard work and giving people, notoriety and attention, like someone like Greta Gerwig, who's not going to be able to go on to make more movies, or someone like Guillermo del Toro, who's not going to be able to make more movies. Like, I like that, obviously. Give people some due so that they can keep making rad art. But we put so much stock in the Oscars, like it actually means something. And I think that's
See, I
what
don't think
have a
people
problem
that
with.
really do.
all it means really is financing. That's all it is. And it's if you're nominated or if you win, then you now have the clout to go and use that to do hopefully bigger and better, or maybe even more interesting or more intricate things. But that's sort of on the industry side of it. From the spectacle side of it, like as far as this Oscars was concerned, I'm not a huge Jimmy Kimmel fan. He did fine. The whole show was fine. The outcomes were fine. But like, for instance, Shape of Water, I love Guillermo del Toro. I think he is a fantastic filmmaker. I'm glad that film won. Do I think it's Best Picture? No.
Yeah.
Get Out was Best Picture.
Good Time was Best Picture, baby. Good Time.
But like all of the nominees this year, something I was really happy with was there wasn't one on the list where I was like, no.
Yeah.
Like there was never like that moment where hell, when La La Land was that whole debacle, even before it, when it was nominated, I was like, really? We're going to go with this, the most baity? Okay.
Thank
Man,
you.
I fucking
fuck that
love
movie.
La La Land.
No, you don't.
I do. I really love
Do
that
you?
movie. Yeah,
He doesn't.
I do. I do love that movie. It should have won.
Listen, I want to see a story with Ryan Gosling saving jazz. That's what I want to see.
You've seen it, man.
Anyway. Yeah, I know.
See, okay, I mean, I really get off on the Oscars. I really like it. I don't put like actual stock in my life in it, but I do like, awarding the best movies of the year.
But that's not what they do.
Okay, I know, but it's like just watching them try to do it. It's fun, but it's obviously not the actual best movies that I think are. But whatever, it's fun
He likes
to watch.
bathing in the ideological fiction.
Thank you, Austin. Yes, thank you. That's what I like to do. It's
Well, nice when
fun,
there's a goalpost,
and I
right?
like
There's-
betting on it. I like gambling on it a lot.
Back, and I'm going to argue games. One of the failures is that we don't have the Oscars because the Oscars are useless. They're a group of people giving themselves an award,
Right.
But because everybody wants to go to the next cocktail party and say they won an Oscar, films that otherwise wouldn't get made that are interesting in new artistic ways. That doesn't happen in stuff like games as often because we don't have that award ceremony.
Thank you. So the Oscars are responsible for good movies getting made, right? That's what you're saying?
In a very cynical way, though, because I think, it's like, all right, we spend the whole year with Marvel movies and action movies, and then, just so we can pat ourselves on the back and convince ourselves that we still have, integrity, we, put some Oscar movies into production. And look, the thing that bothers me is that the Oscars should not be valuable because they're the Oscars. The Oscars should have to earn our respect by the fact that they reward the best movies, which they don't. So I think that therefore the Oscars aren't meaningful.
Well, it's
I think it also
exactly-
produces a certain kind of knowledge that I think is detrimental to social relations because it just reinforces and it turns it into a bigger deity, or it turns celebrities or celebrity culture into a bigger deity, and I think that has serious problems for mediating social relations. It just makes it it makes it as though these individuals have a certain level of social and political import and value that I'm not necessarily sure we ought to try to fall at their feet.
Absolutely, absolutely not. It's all just a charade. It's a spectacle, and. It's the lowest rated Oscars in history, and there's a reason for that.
It wasn't a good one. I mean, it wasn't that fun. Not many funny jokes.
But then at the same time, and again, I feel like there's two sides of the coin, and I'm not, believe me, I'm not trying to defend the Oscars as an institution, but it's that whole thing of it is fun on a surface level. I enjoy the quote competition of it, but also lots of stuff in life only matters because it matters. Like, it's self-perpetuated itself to this point. Where like, I mean, again, this is a different conversation, but like, this isn't a perfect analogy, but money only works because we believe in it.
Right.
Like, it's this clout that the Oscars has only works because we believe in it. So,
Exactly.
But I do think that belief is eroding.
yes, the belief is eroding, and also just back to the point of like, it enables the ability, or enables more good films to be made. I don't entirely agree with that. I would say that it allows the sample size of the chance of better films to be made to be larger. Because
I like that.
Is the belief in it eroding, or is it just simply dispersing into new forms? You know, YouTube, Instagram celebrities, you know, things like that. Netflix.
Well, the faith in the Oscars specifically.
Well,
right. Okay. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it used to be
Celebrity culture. Belief in celebrity culture, I think, is proliferating even to a greater degree, because now everyone with their own social media profile is their own celebrity.
Right. I'm talking about the
they're all
institution of the
reporting on
Oscars
those people.
specifically.
because
they're all reporting
because
on those people that we're talking about.
are you saying, Jared, because they're not giving the best movies the awards?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I think other reasons. I mean, that's the reason why my belief in it and my faith in it has eroded. But I think that in general, people are a little bit sick and tired of the constant political charade. I think people are more than ever realizing that, like, wait a second, I've never heard of this movie and it's winning Best Picture. There are other movies that I thought were really great, and you know, there's almost this kind of like, you know, the reason I stopped watching the Oscars is, and this is going to sound super douchey, but when The Dark Knight wasn't nominated for Best Picture, I was like, fuck this. The Reader, no one saw that bullshit, you know.
Yeah,
and there is this very elitism to it that I think that more than ever is turning people off.
I feel like the elitism is just this a byproduct of the fact that there's more movies, there's more niche movies, there's more awesome niche movies. Whereas back in the day,
What are you talking about? There's less movies made now than ever.
That's not true at all, dude.
Well, in the theaters.
Yeah, okay, in the theaters, but I'm saying that back in the day there was like, okay, the 10 movies, 15 movies that came out like over the year where like everyone saw them, and then everyone, you know, the biggest bestest movie won and everyone liked it usually, and it was like, you know, fucking Lawrence of Arabia or whatever. And now it's kind of like, yeah, Moonlight is winning and stuff, which, you know, very few people saw that movie, but like everyone that voted it, you know. But I think that's what kind of what you're saying is that the mainstream kind of doesn't really relate to the movies that are either getting nominated or winning, you know.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, I love Moonlight. But
yeah,
anyway,
I fucking love Moonlight
Moonlight's
too.
great.
But it's kind of like it's, you know, no one saw it. Well, you can't deny it.
So Jared,
even-
why do you think there's a reason why Christopher Nolan is getting shut out? I mean, you mentioned Dark Knight. The person who wrote us on this email mentioned the fact that Christopher Nolan seemed to get shafted. Do you have a theory on why he hasn't been successful?
yeah, because his movies make too much money.
You think?
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's like, you know, it's not refined enough.
See, that's what I was saying is that it used to be the movies that made a lot of money would win if they were the best movie.
Well, that's because the movies that used to make a lot of money, there was kind of this more, you know, monoculture in which, you know, like there was an agreement on what was considered elevated, which was considered prestigious. You know, these days, you know, because there's so much niche stuff, the only stuff that really reaches a wide audience is Marvel movies, but there is no real Lawrence of Arabia of our time.
No, yeah, I agree. It's a problem.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think Dunkirk should have won. I think of that list personally, Dunkirk, I think was the best film of the year. So
I think of the list,
with the
Get Out
options that were
was.
given.
but-
Of those 10 or 9 or whatever they were.
I loved The Disaster Artist, and someone who's
That wasn't on the list,
No,
though.
I know it wasn't, but I'm just saying, like, as someone who moved to LA with no prospects and meets a lot of weirdos in an attempt to just get a paycheck, it really
That would have been
resonated
your
with
best
me.
picture.
That's my favorite movie of the year, probably.
That would have been my best performance.
You know, a movie I thought, I'm curious to what the extra credits guys think about this. Did you guys like Split? I loved Split.
Oh yeah, Split was awesome. In fact, that
Split
was one.
Yeah, Split was cool. I didn't like it. Didn't grab me, but like I enjoyed my time with it.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we're way over time. I think we're gonna have to just cut it there.
All right.
I want to just say, guys, check out Extra Credits on YouTube. Check out their Twitch stream. Check out their podcast. These guys obviously are smart as a whip. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This is a great, great conversation.
No, thank you very much for having us.
Yeah.
Where can we find y'all on the internet?
Wait, is James still here? Did we lose James? He hasn't spoken.
Oh God. Where can we find James on the internet?
I can tell you. Oh, he's here.
He's here.
Yeah, I got dropped for a while. I got a weird Google error, which I'd never seen before. Hangouts decided to explode, but I am back.
Welcome back.
Well, I just got done flattering you guys.
Oh, awesome.
So I was just going to say, you guys are smart as a whip. Everyone who's listening to this, if you're watching us on YouTube, go over to Extra Credits, subscribe. These guys are super insightful, and it was a pleasure having you guys on.
It's been a blast. No, this has been great. Thank you for the shout out, and hopefully we get to do this again sometime. And tonight, aren't some of you guys coming to join us?
Yes,
on Twitch?
Yes, sir. I will be on Twitch. I'm looking forward to that.
Sweet.
All right, 5 p.m. Pacific time. For any of you guys who want, we are talking Black Panther on Twitch because we also do a movie show. So if you want a day filled with the group of us and movies, today is the day.
And by the way, we've got a collaboration on our YouTube channels coming up with Extra Credits. We're both doing a video on Nier Automata, the Square Enix
so
video
good.
game. So
Yes.
be on the lookout for that. I'm excited to see your guys' video, and I'm excited to see how it does.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for having us on.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
All right, so just a reminder, you guys, we're still doing our Rick and Morty podcast, The Squanch. Also want to ask you guys if you could take the time to leave us a review on iTunes. It really helps us. Other than that, that's it. That's it for today, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Goodbye from Hollywood.